I became a Mason in July the 12th, 1966, 54 years ago. I was initiated in an annex of the St. Michael's and All Angels in Martinez on San Martin and Eduardo Costa. Oh, sorry, Sarmiento and Eduardo Costa. And it was a interesting experience because my father, that I knew he was a Mason, but he never told me, but I got to know through other parties that he was a Mason. He told me to get dressed with a dark suit, black shoes, and black socks, and he said, and don't worry about the tie. Shirt has to be white because we're going for a meeting. And well, I had a sensation that it was going to be something to do with Masonry. And well, I was initiated, and at that moment, George Newell was the master of River Plate. River Plate was consecrated by the Old Georgian Lodge. That was through the Old Georgians, River Plate, 788 was created. And it was, I remember the dinner was there was a lot of people there, and I wasn't frightened during the ceremony. I think I was more or less reckless, but it didn't frighten me. And in a couple of years, I was passed to a fellowcraft. Then, in my work, I was sent to work in Brazil. And then I had a few years that I wasn't present in the lodge. When I came back to the lodge, we were no longer in St. Michael's, but in the community church in Acasuso. The community church used to belong to the chairman of Shell, and he, I think it was Shell, sold it to the community church in Acasuso. And there I became, I gave my third degree, and I became secretary of the lodge, and then the worship master for 3 years running. But during the time, the town office or head office was more or less unknown to me. And after I became a master mason, or the master of the lodge, I was invited to go to Peru. And there through George Newell, he named me secretary, and I introduced a computer into the district, because everything was done on a typewriter. The former secretary was Ber Talwan. And well, there came the age of the computer and making the book, which is now called the yearbook. And it was an interesting experience because I had my lodge on one side and the district on the other. And the district officers were half Old Georgians and half Old Philomathians. And we used to put each other's leg, who was running the the show in the district, or St. Albans or St. George's. And that was very interesting. In that moment, Jimmy De Negri was the district deputy Grand Master, and it was a very, very nice atmosphere. During my time in Rural Plate, I had the sense of brotherhood that I never felt anywhere else. And I made lots of friends. And the interesting part of my experience in Masonry is that one came in and there was no age group. We were all brothers, even though the difference in age was 50 years. And that brotherhood was something I never experienced. I never experienced it, not even in school, not even when I played rugby. It was different, a different, absolute different sensation. And I imagine that the principles of Masonry, which I tried to follow, was that of brotherly love, belief, and truth, which kind of amalgamated us and brought us together. It was a very, very interesting situation. And every time one finds that in Masonry, you go learning something else. There's no end to learning. You learn when you hear sometimes an interdependence who writes a paper. And you find that there's lots of things that go interesting, that come into your life. You say, well, I didn't know this. I was in a Zoom meeting last night, and I learned about a history about the candles in the lodge. So it was really a nice experience. Through my years in Masonry, I was, as I mentioned before, District Grand Secretary, District Grand Treasurer, Assistant District Grand Master, and then my highest job was to be the Deputy District Grand Master. And the years seemed to fly very fast, and I made lots of friends. And I would say that today, 90% of my friends are Masons, and a few from the school, and others that you get to know through your work. But as I say, I'm always an entered apprentice. That is really a very short period of rapidly going through my life. As personally, I left because of my work. Then I came back, and from then on, it was it got to be a meeting every day of the week, where one began to go into different orders. But really, it was and is an interesting part of my life. I would say that is my life in Freemasonry. So I think it's a nice experience. 54 years went by, but so quick that one can't believe one is the age one is. But I don't feel that age. I feel that, as I said before, your age doesn't matter. You get together with young Masons, and you feel that they're brothers, and you could be their grandfather. So really, it's a very, very nice experience. In the annex that was made by the Masons and where our temple was, it was just beside the church of St. Michael's and All Angels. And when I was about 18 years old, I used to be the Sunday school teacher at that church. So it was really, when I walked into I was blindfolded, but I walked into the church and I said, this place, well, I saw it before going in, but it brought many memories of teaching the children, the small kids, the stories of the Bible, and being the Sunday school teacher there. It was very interesting. Well, I was the youngest in the crowd, and I found that I could speak to the other Masons that were there, older than I, and they treated me as an equal. And not had a lot of jewels on their jackets, and I was surprised at how well I was treated. And especially when I took my second degree, also there was a wonderful atmosphere. Maybe because George Newell was working with my father in Shell, and when I was given the address, it was done by Lloyd Davis, who was a very well-known Mason in the district, and really was absolutely incredible. And that address, well, one could bring it home to your family and everybody, show it to everybody, because it is, I would say, together with another address, I would say the essence, you got the essence there of Freemason. With the address to the entered apprentice and the address to the brethren, I think you've got Freemason in a nutshell. Yes, I do. The Mason, it was more than being a brother, was Jock Roger. Excuse my tears, but really, he was a wonderful fellow. And he was always helping us out, traveling 100 kilometers away from his home to be at the meetings, totally reliable. If I needed any backing, he was there to help me. He was absolutely a wonderful fellow. I'll never forget him. Well, I think it's I would say it's something that makes you be a better person. If you want to comply with the principles of Masonry, you should be a better person. It conduces you to be a better person. Because if you live by its precepts, then you cannot be but a better person. Well, my father was very proud. My wife was pleased I was a Mason until I began not coming for dinner 5 days a week. There she got a bit nervous, to say the least. But I did learn why I used to call certain gentlemen, the fathers of my friends, uncles, and others were misters. Because I learned that when he was an uncle, he was a brother to my father in that moment. And I was very intrigued when I was young that my father knew everything that went on in school. And I used to say to myself, how did he get to know that I didn't behave myself with Mr. Richards in geography at school? And then I learned that he was a Mason in King Edward VII, and all the masters and the headmaster of St. Norman's were Masons. So they got to know exactly how you had behaved during the 2 weeks or 3 weeks that they had their meetings. So I couldn't escape. I was really caught there. But it was many years later that I began to remember that. And then lots of my school friends became Masons. Their fathers were Masons. I remember the Gwither family, where Michael was the eldest, and he was the worship master, and he passed the baton on to Peter, that was my age, as master of St. John's. So when I go to St. John's and I look at all the former headmasters, I see lots of my friends' fathers there in the pictures of the former worship masters of St. John's. So really, it brings so many memories, so many things that you tie up, and suddenly you find that, well, oh, I know that fellow there. He's the father of my friend at school. When I look at the pictures when I go to St. John's. And then I look at the list of the former worship masters, and I find my uncles, my mother's brothers were all Masons. And then you would find Richie in St. John's, my Uncle Johnny and my Uncle Horace, all Masons there. And, well, it's a very, I would say, great part of the community were Masons in the days of my father. But then the war broke out and lots went over to the war and unfortunately didn't come back. But I would say that it was one of the, it is still now, one of the most important parts of my life, being a Mason. When I became a Mason, I used to get my summons by a handwritten letter, and sometimes a typed letter. But that went changing with the advancement of computers in the country. And then the emails. Nowadays, practically one doesn't write a letter. It's done by email, where you attach the summons, and most times we're using this application called WhatsApp and others. And now with this pandemic, we have gone to Zooms. This has changed the world, and I would say that the shareholders of Zoom must be very, very pleased, because their shares rocketed due to this pandemic and the use of Zooms. So you would find in a district the handwritten secretary's summons and his minutes of the meetings, handwritten, and suddenly it began to be typed in and stuck in the books, and lately directly by computer printing. And that, in a way, is an advantage, because we have digitalized our last couple of years in our summons and in our secretary's books. But it would be really good to go doing as begun in St. John's, to copy all the minutes, because we have minute books from over 150 years. So to not lose the history of these different lodges, because during these the years I've been a Mason, we have had a couple of, well, I remember only one is really Columbia Lodge that closed down. They worked in a different rite, not emulation. They worked in a York rite, and it was principally for Americans, North Americans living in Argentina. And as we met in the same building, in the United Community Church, we used to go and help when they needed officers to take different jobs on. We used to go and give them a hand and try to learn their ritual. It's really, really very difficult, because the ritual books are all dots and you just can't read it. The only one that knew what was going on there was Jimmy the Negri, and as far as I know, but he could have said anything, because nobody could say that you made a mistake. Or there was a big change. Before, the elder Masons used to correct you in open lodge, and that was a bit of a shock, because you were told, like, if there were your teachers at school, but you were over 20 or 30 years old, that you made a mistake. And that more or less surprised me. That is no longer done. That is a big change, and I think some members were so embarrassed of being told that they were making a mistake or they had made a mistake that they possibly left Masonry because of their embarrassment. And others were gentle in their manner. They would come and visit you and tell you the mistakes you made in the last meeting. So I had a good teacher with George Newell. He used to phone me up and tell me what I was doing wrong as master of River Plate. So I owe a lot to him to correct my mistakes as being master in the lodge. One point I remember so well, when we put in one of the topics was to read a paper. He said to me, "You don't put to read a paper. You put the name of the paper and who wrote it." So that was something that I would never forget. And when I see it shocks me, because I remember George Newell telling me very, very gentle manner that I was making a mistake. So and then another issue that I remember, in Peru, we were having our dinner and we were about to give the Titus toast. So each one said how they would say the Titus toast. And I remember that Brian Partington wrote it out in Scottish. We didn't understand a word. And then Joe Levy said, "Listen, the right way to say it is being written by Quarto Coronati, and it goes as follows: by command of the worshiper master, I give you the Titus toast." And then you gave the Titus toast. But those are things that one goes remembering and trying to keep up the right way of doing things. Another point is we have lost a lot of learning by memory. That is something that, and I'm one that I used to hate learning by memory at school. My strong points were all mathematics, chemistry, physics, but not learning by heart, not learning poems, but I had to do it. But it was very difficult for me to learn by memory, and still is. For me to learn something by memory, I've got to write it down maybe 10 times, and then not remember it 2 weeks later and have to start again. But well, that is well described when you read If by Rudyard Kipling, one of our brothers. That's a nice poem to remember. Well, I remember the 2nd of April, 1982. I went to pick up my brother-in-law, and we were going to the factory, and I told him, we've invaded the Falkland Islands. He said, no, you're pulling my leg. So I put the radio on, and we had invaded the Falkland Islands. Now, we are a district, a British district in Argentina. So what was to be our attitude? And I remember that we were informed by George Newell by telephone, no writing, no other way of communication, that we should stop our meetings. And unfortunately, we had to stop our meetings. Well, I was told that he had approached the Grand Master of the Argentine Grand Lodge, which we are very friendly, and he gave us good advice that we should avoid meetings because people could get a bit cross that these British were having their meetings and we were at war. And well, that was really what happened. We stopped our meetings until July that year, and then in August we started again and we carried on as usual. But from April to August, there were no meetings, and Peru was closed down, and also we didn't go to the different churches that, in the case of River Plate, we were first consecrated in the Church of St. Michael's in All Angels, in that annex they had on Sarmiento, and then we were invited to leave, which was really, I would say, tough on us, because we had built that part of the Masons built that part of the church, and we went to St. Michael's and All Angels, to the American Community Church that gave us a place to meet. We had to put up the temple and put it and close it. They take all the furniture down and put it away every meeting. The same at St. Michael's and All Angels. And then they also said they had no room, so we had to go to work in Peru. And then working in Peru, we were able to rent a room in Tigre Boat Club. Tigre Boat Club, many years ago, took on people who wanted to live there, and there were many expats that used to go to Tigre and live there. One I remember very well was the treasurer of the Bank of London in South America. His name was Furtado. Then his son came out to Argentina, and he lived there also. And the room we meet now was where one of our members used to sleep. And it's really a lot of memories. I was a member also of the Tigre Boat Club when I used to go out rowing. But it was very. It's very nice. It's a small room. We are very close close family. Well, you know it because you remember now, Kurt. But there's a lot of, I would say, brotherly love, relief, and truth there. We are really, really great friends, even with guys who are in the almost 90s. Well, I'm in my almost 80s. So the time differences has been lost. But we're a small group, but very, very friendly. And we help each other in every way we can. So we went back to the northern suburbs really because it was the idea to have a lodge in the northern suburbs. That's why River Plate was created. We had one in the southern suburbs, St. John's and King Edward's, but nothing in the northern suburbs until I think it's around 63, where River Plate was consecrated. So I came into Masonry about 3 years after the lodge was consecrated. Yes, we were. For many years we had a Masonic church meeting with our families, our friends, and we used to go in with full regalia. And to walk into the church, we used to go to a doorway on Peru into a big room where we used to change into and put our regalia on. And then there was a passageway, very damp and dreary passage, which we appeared on Birano Street, and we walked into the church. Of course, everybody was sitting down waiting for us, and in that moment we walked in. There were also members of the Argentine Grand Lodge that were there, and leading the group was the district Grand Master, followed by his deputies and his officers, and then the rest of the different with the bar banners, and it was very nice. And I remember that we generally sang Honored Christian Soldiers, and we used to give the service. The service was given by the worship master, or whom he delegated. In one case, it was Mason called Macon, who is an uncle to Norma Thurn, and he used to talk a lot, very well versed on the church matters, and it was a very nice service. And when we sang Honored Christian Soldiers, that again brought back things one goes learning when you get into other orders. When you become, in some cases, a soldier of the cross. And you will remember in what order that would be. Well, I think charity in Argentina has grown into so many different groups. And those groups sometimes are organized and they are paying expenses, and suddenly their charities are being used to cover their overheads. And I think that if one concentrates in a place like civil entity York and concentrating it through one entity that has no practically overheads is one of the best ways to encourage the Masons to channelize the charity. I try to say, no, my place for charity is in York. So I don't go committing myself for charities in other entities, other than sometimes it's a must, but it's better to channelize all your efforts and your monies into the district where we should be known, and that is something that we should be more active in that sense, and know that York is our entity, our legal entity to channel our charities. And unfortunately, due to excesses in using charity organizations in the country, we are limited to the deductions in income tax. Before, we were allowed to deduct our charities in income tax, and there were so many excesses that now is only limited to entities who are either dedicated to education or to medicine. If not, you're not liable to be able to deduct your donations from charity. But nevertheless, we still carry on with our objectives, and charity is one of our I would say, it's brotherly love, relief, and charity. So we have the triangle, and one of the feet is charity. We have reduced the quantity of lodges in Argentina, and I believe that the reason is that most of the big companies in Argentina, starting with the railways, were British. And the idea of Masonry was brought over by the British. And that's why we had lodges in Bahia Blanca. That was the end of the rails where all the workshops were established, and lots of British were there as and became Masons because they were Masons at home in England. And you find that also in other parts of the country, in Tucumán, where there were lots of sugar mills belonging to British. There was one called La Corona, and so it was, of course, British. And the railways covered the country, and there were lodges in different ends of the tracks. We had lots of people living there. I worked in Forestal, and Forestal built a town in Villa Guillermina in Santa Fe because the biggest factory of tannin extract was there. And there was waterworks and there was sewers. Before there were electricity and sewers and waterworks in Santa Fe, in the city of Santa Fe. So there were a lot of British companies that after the war, the British companies were closing down, selling off, and the investments in Argentina changed from being British to being mostly North American. And that, I believe, is one of the reasons, and the war itself, that we are less lodges than before. We are growing slowly with Argentines that speak English. We are opening new lodges. Fidelity was the last one. Now Fidelity is going to open up a lodge of Royal Arch. So slowly there are places that suddenly the masonry is growing again. Masonry under the British system. But I would say that was one of the reasons. In Rosario, you had, in Perez, a town just outside Rosario, you had the big works for all the steam engines, railways. They were repaired there. They had lots of British born people working there on the railways. I've even seen master masons certificates issued to Britons that were working on the railways in Santa Fe, and there was his work. They put down what was his job. It was down as maquinista. And this fellow was called Curtis. And I got to know that because I was going into the Argentine Grand Lodge, and at the entrance on the left-hand side, they have their library. And there was a guy speaking to them in English, and nobody understood. So I worked as an interpreter. And this fellow was Peter Curtis, and he had his grandfather's certificate for Lockyer Adams in Venado Tuerto, and he wanted to know who introduced his grandfather to masonry in the Argentine Grand Lodge. Unfortunately, the records were lost, and I couldn't answer his question. But that, again, is something that we should try to copy all our minute books and have them, because it's part of our history. And I remember going to the Grand Lodge in England and asking them, where's my certificate when I joined the Masonry? And they had it. And that was part that hadn't been put on the computers yet. But they were putting it all on the computer. Well, the future of Freemasonry, I believe that we are going to integrate the future of our district with lots of Argentine surnames. That doesn't mean to say we're going to lose our English, because there are lots of Argentines that speak very good English. And the use of computers, which are generally in English, all the instructions, and the people having to, if they wanted to progress, to learn English. And if you read all the manuals of different imported articles which are in English, there is really an obligation for the Argentines to learn English, especially if they are becoming or going to be engineers, and especially doctors. That is my great hope for new members of the district. For example, in the University of Medicine in the Austral University, the last 2 years are all given in English. That is obliging the doctors to really know what they're talking about when they're reading or learning about different operations and different advancements and papers they've got to read, which are generally in English. And English has become a universal language, which I have no doubt that it would not be an impediment for Argentines to become Masons of our district. And what I have seen, I would say, comparing with other grand lodges, is that we are different. There is something that is difficult to define. It's a feeling that each one will measure it according to the value each one gives, but going to a different grand lodge and going to your own lodge, there is a different sense of, I would say, peace. You find peace and harmony in the district. There is I would say, your refuge from the storms of the outer world. And it's not only a feeling that we as members of the district feel, but those from the other lodges I mentioned feel when they go into our district. They feel that ethos, that I would say something invisible or not comprehensible sense that one feels when one walks into the district. You're going into, I would say, a safe place. You're going into a place where you will be with your friends. You're really like if you're being transported into another world where there's peace and harmony. And that is what one feels when one goes in there. You go into the district and you leave your worries behind you, and you go into another world. And that is really, really extraordinary. And all I can say is that I wish the district the best of luck. And I see that the young Masons coming up, which will be the future of our lodge. And I hope to be able to live long enough to help them in every means in my limited capacity to assist them in their jobs. That is, I would say, the aim one has, to assist the younger Masons, and especially if they happen to be relatives of one, to take on a difficult task, because it's not easy to run the district. There are sometimes occasions where the storms are blowing hard and the waves are getting higher and higher. But we would overcome. And I hope to be there to help the younger generation that will take over. And that's all I can offer. But as I say, I'm always an entered apprentice.